Hi, welcome to BeMORE's webinar tonight, Living Life with Purpose. I'm Nicolette Wolfe, the CEO of BeMORE, and BeMORE is a charity that is passionate about embedding generosity into culture, and we do this through our online community and lots of webinars such as the one tonight, inspiring people to make a difference in this world through discovering the joys and impact generosity creates. Now, BeMORE is delighted tonight to welcome the motivational speaker and podcaster, Jaz O'Hara. Jaz is the founder also of the Worldwide Tribe. This is an organization and online community that supports refugees and asylum seekers globally. So let me give you a bit of background. The Worldwide Tribe was born from a life-changing Facebook post Jaz wrote about her first visit to the Calais jungle in 2015. And Jaz's authentic account went viral. People through it raised £250,000. It reached over 13 million people and sparked physical collections of donations, lots and lots of them. So since then, Jaz has worked tirelessly in refugee camps across Europe and the Middle East. She's a writer for the Huffington Post. She's winner of the Mary Claire Future Shaper Award and a member of Amnesty International's collective. She has become the leading voice on the topic of migration and speaks everywhere from TEDx's to the United Nations in NYC. So, wow, it's such a privilege, Jaz, to have you come and speak tonight. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you for that lovely introduction. You said it all now. I can go.
I think there's a lot more that you can say to us. So what I recommend everyone is Jaz will talk and then just enjoy it, but we have the chat open. Please feel free to leave all your questions in the chat and I will attempt to facilitate a Q&A once Jaz has finished her talk. So Jaz, over to you.
Thank you so much. And yes, please do. I love the questions at the end. That's always my favorite part. So please definitely leave some questions. Think of them as they come and just type them as you go. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you all. So hopefully you can see my presentation. Here you go. Now, I'm going to share a little bit of my story today to, I guess, highlight how the last kind of 5-6 years have been for me, how my life has kind of changed and taken me into a completely different direction than ever expected. But to give you a little overview, Nicolette has just done a great job. I am the founder of an organisation, an online community called the Worldwide Tribe, and we support refugees, as mentioned. And I never actually thought that I would never have foreseen that I would be going into this space. It all happened very organically, and I'm going to share that story with you today. But first, I would like to tell you the story of somebody very important to me. His name is Mez. Let me see if I can get him up on the screen. Here you go. So Mez is a refugee from Eritrea, and Mez fled his country, fled Eritrea when he was 13 years old, and he left because he didn't want to go into the army. Now, Eritrea has compulsory military service, forced military service for everybody. So his father had already been in prison for fleeing the army. His older brother was already in the army. So Mez knew that it wouldn't be long before it was his fate too, that it would be his turn. And the day that happened, the day that the army came to his village to conscript him and 2 of his friends, his best friends from when they were young, they ran away without really considering that they would never go back. They left with literally the clothes on their back. Mez always says he was wearing flip-flops, that he didn't have a chance to say goodbye to his mum. He didn't really think about the hugeness of what he was doing, right? Of the impact of what he was doing. He just knew that he didn't want to go into the army that day. He always says that he wanted to hold a pen, not a gun. You know, he wanted education. He wanted to continue his education. So they left Eritrea. They left their village and continued to run until they crossed the border into Ethiopia. I've got a little map for you here, actually, just because if anyone listening is anything like me, I had not heard of Eritrea before I met Mez, and this hopefully is a useful visual representation of where it is. It's in Eastern Africa, the Horn of Africa. It got its independence from Ethiopia in the 90s, and it borders Sudan. So they crossed the border of Eritrea into Ethiopia and then continued into Sudan, where they found themselves living in a refugee camp. Now, it was only when they made it to Sudan that Mez was able to call his mum to let her know that he was safe, that he was still alive, because at the time, Ethiopia and Eritrea had no communication, no phone lines between the two. They've been at war for a very long time. So it was in Sudan after 6 weeks that he managed to tell his mum, I'm alive, I'm safe, I'm okay. But of course, at that point, he knew that he couldn't return, right? He couldn't return because he knew what fate was awaiting him if he did. And his mum told him that too. She was like, you know, as much as it pains me to say, you have to continue. So he continued into Libya. Now, to get to Libya, he needed to cross the Sahara Desert, and only two of them, of the three, had the money to pay the smugglers to do that. Mez had asked his mum, she'd asked everyone they knew in the village, and they crossed the Sahara Desert, which took them 15 days. Now, in that time, they had no food and minimal water, and they crossed in trucks that looked a bit like this. So I worked with Mez to try and find images as close to his journey as possible. Obviously, this isn't the actual truck that Mez was on, but it's as close to as we could find on Google. And Mez explained to me that they put the women and the children in the middle of the truck to keep them safe, and the men on the outside. And this journey is hugely dangerous. As I say, it took them 15 days. They had no food. And one of Mez's friends fell from the truck in the Sahara Desert. And the trucks don't stop. The trucks don't stop if someone falls from the truck. And Mez never saw his friend again after that. But what he did see in the desert was many people that had crossed before him, many people that hadn't made it across the desert, many people that had died along the way. Bearing in mind Mez is 13 years old here, right? It's pretty wild what he experienced at this age, and this is not the end of it. So once he made it to Libya, he found himself again in a situation where he knew that he couldn't stay. All Mez wanted was to be able to go to school, to be able to find somewhere that he could be safe, that he could live a normal life, any life that even resembled, you know, how he'd grown up with his family in a village, going to school, a loving environment. And Libya wasn't that. Libya was a difficult place, or is a difficult place, continues to be a difficult place to be as a refugee. People call it hell on earth. Many people that I've met along the way say that it's just lawless, you know, that crazy things happen, that it's very unsafe. There's a lot of slavery. People were enslaved who were refugees there by the smugglers, by Libyans. Anyway, I could go on about stories from Libya, but I will carry on with Mez's journey because he knew that he had to continue. He knew that he had to carry on to find somewhere where he would be safe. And in order to do that, he needed to cross the Mediterranean Sea. Now, we've all seen the pictures of the unsafe boats that people cross the Mediterranean Sea in, right? And Mez's was no different. It was a big one like this. Again, this was the closest that we could find, packed full of 300 people. And it's not seaworthy. They're not suitable for the journey at all. And Mez had never seen the sea before. He didn't know how to swim. He was very scared of making this crossing, but he knew that he couldn't go back. He had to go forwards. So he boarded that boat, hoping, praying that he'd make it to the other side. But Mez's worst nightmare came true on that journey, and his boat actually capsized. And Mez tells me about looking up into the sky, the dark sky, and thinking, this is it. I'm going to die at 13 years old in the Mediterranean. I'm going to join many people before me in this watery grave of the Mediterranean. He would not be alone. Many thousands of people die on this crossing. But a miracle happened, and Mez was saved by the Italian Coast Guard and taken to Italy, where he was wrapped in an emergency blanket, one of those silvery ones, and given a little bit of food and basically sent on his way. When Mez talked to other refugees who had arrived to Italy before him, they said to him, Italy is not the place for you to find safety, to seek asylum. Many people are returned to Eritrea, many people are deported to Eritrea from Italy. So they urged him to continue. So Mez walked across Europe. Where he could, he bunked on trains. He didn't have any money. He tells a lovely story about a German lady who put her arm around him and bought him a ticket one day when the ticket man came. But generally he hid in the toilets of trains. He walked, as I say, for long distances until he found his way to Calais, to a notorious refugee camp known as the Jungle. Now again, Mez knew that he couldn't stay here for long. The conditions were terrible and he was literally sleeping in a tent in the mud. And this isn't what Mez wanted. This isn't the life that he was awaiting when he left, right? So Mez followed other people, other refugees, in trying to cross the Channel, trying to cross from Calais to Kent to the UK. And one day in the summer of 2015, one Saturday night, Mez was successful in his journey. He hid underneath the Eurotunnel train and he made it to the UK. And that day, Kent Social Services put him in a taxi and sent him to a family who had come to the end of their fostering process to become foster parents. And those foster parents were my mum and dad. So that day, Mez became my little brother, the first of 4 foster brothers, all from different countries, from Eritrea, one from Eritrea, one from Sudan, one from Libya, and one from Afghanistan. So Mez has been with my family, he's been my little brother for nearly 6 years now, which is crazy. I can't believe that it's been so long. And in that time, these are some of the highlights that I wanted to share with you. Mez learned English. He spoke no English when he arrived to the UK. He did his exams. He even was voted prom king at school. And now Mez and I often give talks together. This is him at that school giving an assembly to, he ended up giving assemblies to the entire school to share a little bit of an insight into what he had experienced to get to the UK. Because when he arrived to that school, he was the only refugee. He was the only person who had experienced anything like he had. And the other 13, 14-year-old kids in his class, they had no idea of what he had experienced. So hopefully, should another refugee or asylum seeking child arrive to that school, the students will have a little bit more of an idea of what they've experienced and what they've been through. And this is Mez's goal, right? This is his mission, to really make sure that people have an awareness of what's happening in Eritrea, of his country. You know, when people asked him where he was from and he said Eritrea, they all had that blank look that I had when he told me. So he's on a mission to try and change that, to try and bring some awareness to the situation in his country. This is another highlight of mine when it comes to Mez's story. This was his first birthday in the UK. And Mez had one picture of his family from Eritrea. It was a picture of his dad. And it was a tiny little passport-sized photo, and it was all creased. And sometimes you would find him in his bedroom, on his bed, just looking at this photo. And my dad loves to draw and paint. So this was a drawing that my dad did of his dad for his first birthday in the UK, and the first present that he'd ever opened, actually. And it still hangs above his bed. I saw it this weekend when I was home, and it reminded me of this lovely memory. So Mez's journey came to an end, or at least one part of his journey came to an end when he made it to the UK that summer of 2015. But that actually marks a pivotal time in my story and my journey, because him arriving to my family really sparked my interest in the refugee crisis, and something that I didn't know anything about at that time. I was working in fashion. I had no knowledge of the humanitarian sector or anything like that. But I wanted to find out more. I wanted to find out more about people like Mez who were arriving to the UK, why they were leaving their countries, what the journeys were like, what the camps were like, why they wanted to come to the UK. These questions that I had that I really felt were not being answered by the media. You know, at the time, it was dehumanizing headlines, as they still are now, but even more so. I remember, especially when people, or especially when they were referring to Calais, right? There was a lot of fear around people arriving from Calais to the UK. So I made the decision to go to Calais, to make the journey, to try and find out a little bit more for myself, I guess. And it was a very naive decision to make. I had no idea what to expect or what would happen. I didn't know what to bring. I just brought what I thought people might need: some warm clothes, some bits of food. And what I experienced there completely changed the course of my life. It completely changed everything for me. And, you know, it wasn't so much the shocking conditions, and absolutely they were shocking, you know, as I said, same as Mez found. People, thousands of people, 3,000 people at the time living in tents in the mud. But it was more the difference between the kindness and the hospitality of the people and the way that they were being portrayed. The reality of the situation was so different from the media portrayal, right? And that felt hugely unjust to me. And what else felt super unjust to me was the fact that people were risking their lives on a daily basis to make this journey to the UK. The same that Mez had underneath the Eurotunnel train, in the back of lorries, doing what they can. And I was able to make that journey back in the comfort of my car with this little purple book that I happened to have, right? And I didn't understand that. It didn't make sense to me. Why is that the case? And on the way home, on the train on the way home, I wrote down some of the things that I was feeling, some of the emotions that I was experiencing, and some of the stories that I'd heard from the people on that first trip that I'd met in the camp. And as Nicolette so beautifully said in the introduction, I wrote a Facebook post back in the days when Facebook was the platform that I guess I was kind of using more. And then I went to work that next morning, woke up early. I remember I was going to a trade show in the Birmingham NEC, and that post had more traction than I could ever have imagined. I think it had been seen by 65,000 or shared by 65,000 people, something crazy. Anyway, what happened after that was the most incredible response to what I had written. Thousands of people wanting to help, wanting to do something for the people in the camp. It was absolutely unbelievable. And I'd done something pretty stupid in that post by sharing my address in it, thinking that only my friends and family would see it, right? And I'd said, you know, if people have tents, sleeping bags, the people in the camp had told me that they were cold at night, that they were hungry during the day, that their basic needs were not being met. And as I say, what happened next was just the most overwhelming thing ever. And it was really what sparked the beginning of the Worldwide Tribe. This is one of our donation drop-off days. We ended up having about 8 warehouses across London, and just the most incredible network of people collecting donations of stuff. You know, we had Amazon deliveries to our door. We had people who pinned notes to care packages that they put together. It was just the most beautiful outpouring of love and support, and an intention to support the people in the camp. So we tried our best, or I tried my best, to bring together, you know, friends and family to get this stuff that people so needed to the people who needed it in the camp. And we started with things like shoes. You know, people just like Mez had arrived to Calais with flip-flops, and it was cold and it was muddy. And as I say, I had no background in on understanding, on knowledge of distribution. So that in itself was challenging, and we learned fast. It was a very fast learning curve. But one of the biggest learnings for me in those early days was that people had the same questions that I had about the camp. You know, people on social media continued to ask me these same things, you know, tell us more about the people, where they're from, the human stories, you know, what's happened to them. Like people wanted to know that. They were ready for a different narrative from what we were hearing in the news. So I continued to write as often as I could about the people I was meeting, the friends I was making, the experiences that I was having. And we started to make films. My little brother, Finn, he was a budding filmmaker at the time. He just left school. As I said, we were just enlisting the help of any friends and family that we could. And Finn started to document what he could in that time, as well as things were developing in the camp. You know, we were really seeing this beautiful movement of volunteers arriving to the camp to do what we could to make it a more dignified place for people to live if they had to live there, you know. And of course the camp shouldn't have been there in the first place, but while it was, we were determined to make it as livable as possible. So as I say, we started to make films, and we made a film called Jangala, which was the first of many films that we went on to make. And it's 15 minutes long. It's on YouTube. So I don't have time to share the whole thing with you today, but I've got a little snippet to share with you. I hope that you enjoy it.
The life here in the camp is very difficult, and it's very, very, very dangerous. Sometimes our friends, our sisters, our brothers died on the tunnel station. I want to say for the peoples of England, we are a peaceful peoples. We are a good peoples.
There's a little trailer for you. And as I say, we made many, many more films after that. And our work quickly grew, our reach and our network from Calais to Greece to Turkey to Jordan and Lebanon. And over the years, you know, I've had the opportunity to meet some incredible people and to hear some of the most heroic stories that I would ever have believed to experience firsthand and hear firsthand. And I guess this accumulation of stories led to our most recent way of sharing them, of amplifying these voices, which is the Worldwide Tribe podcast. So it started on World Refugee Day in 2019. So we've been going for nearly 2 years, and it's really become the nucleus of the way that we share stories. Each episode shares a heroic account of somebody with lived experience of migration, somebody impacted by the refugee crisis. And I think I've got a picture of Mez sharing his story on, I think it's episode 5, which is still the most popular episode ever, because he tells it in a way that I never could do justice to. So if you're interested to hear more of his story from his own words, then I would very, very much recommend hearing his account, because it's really quite incredible. And over the years, you know, I've had the opportunity to meet incredible people, as I say, and travel to lots of incredible places that I never expected or thought I would. But obviously in this last year, things have been different. The pandemic has meant that none of us have been traveling as much as we were, and lots of our freedoms have been taken away. And it's meant that the direction of the worldwide tribe has shifted too, in the sense that we have had a focus closer to home. Now, as you guys know, there are refugees everywhere in the world, especially or as well as in the UK, right? And in this last year, we've seen an increase in channel crossings, in people arriving on boats to our shores. There's been many things that we have been focusing on this year closer to home in the UK, including Napier Barracks, and which is an example of one of the UK's first 2 refugee camps in ex-army barracks. Again, their conditions are super substandard, and we've been calling for their immediate closure because they are absolutely not fit for purpose for people newly arriving in the UK. But anyway, our focus this year has been much closer to home, as I say, and we've been talking a lot about these channel crossings and the way that they have also been represented in the media. And we actually made a film about these channel crossings with 2 of my foster brothers, Mez, and my Sudanese brother, Bijo, which I would love to share with you today. It's called Mother, and we shot it in Hastings, and we had to have some fish and chips after we shot it, of course, because we were on the seaside. And I very much hope that you enjoy it. This film is a very personal one to me. It's very close to home, and I think that it really represents why we do what we do and the core of the worldwide tribe's purpose and reason for being. So it's just a couple of minutes long, but here it is.
An attempt by migrants to cross the channel from France has resulted in tragedy after 2 adults and 2 children died when the boat carrying them sank. French officials say that 15 others have been taken to hospital.
Heard today that a teenager, a 16-year-old, has been found dead on a beach in Calais. We believe that it's a migrant from Sudanese descent.
I just remember how cold the water was when the boat capsized. That's all I could feel.
I had never seen the sea before. The darkness of the water surprised me.
I was very, very scared. Our smuggler told us not to move around at all. None of us could swim. If I go in, I'll die. The only thing that we can do is hold each other in tight and pray so we don't drown. This is the house that I arrived 5 years ago. The taxi driver was trying to find the house and everything, and then he pulled up over here, and I was literally standing here, same, and then I didn't know what to expect. I don't know if it's Eritrean family or English family. When they opened the door, was a lot of happy people, welcoming, very nice. The happiest day of my life.
On the day that he came, we'd all been waiting, and there he was. His eyes were, full of trauma. I just wanted to put my arms around him and tell him it would all be okay, that he was safe now. I've now gone through the process 3 more times with the other boys, and each time it has brought me so much joy.
My mum, this family means literally everything to me. It feels like a dream.
I didn't know these boys 5 years ago, but now they're my sons.
As soon as I got to this house, I feel connected to them just like that. We all love each other, respect each other. This is what I love about this family.
I feel happy, safe, and I feel loved.
I love having all my family at home around a big dinner table. And there's always space for one more person. I'm not just caring for them, I love them.
I really appreciate you guys for watching that with me today. I haven't watched it for a little while and it always brings up lots of emotion for me. But I guess the message that that film puts across is the message that I want to leave you with, which is about welcoming each other, being welcoming, celebrating our differences, recognizing that we're all in this together, that we all live on this world together, we all live on a shared earth, right? We're all sharing this human experience. That is really the essence of the Worldwide Tribe. And here are our links to our Facebook, our Instagram, our website, if you do want to find out more and connect with us. We've got some time for questions now, but I appreciate you all very much for listening, and I'm hoping that there are some questions. Thank you, Nicolette, for providing this space and opportunity.
Hey, it's an absolute pleasure, Jaz, and just so delighted we can support your message, which is so powerful. And just it must be so frustrating, and it's so hard to know that what we see in the media and what is actually going on in reality are two very different things. And it's so wonderful that you're trying to bring that truth into the public domain. So I guess one thing that I know a lot of our community will be wanting to know is, how can they get involved? You know, we're sitting here in our nice, comfortable spaces, but it's all still going on. And you're clearly doing lots of things in the UK at the moment, as well as abroad in a more digital sense. So how could they start to support this?
That is a great question. And I have a wealth of answers to that, I guess, because there are loads of ways that you can get involved. So if you have time to give, then you can volunteer. We have an amazing partner called Indigo Volunteers who place people in grassroots volunteer placements. Care for Calais are looking for volunteers at the moment. We don't personally take volunteers through the Worldwide Tribe, but we do run and support projects, so you can donate as well. But if you don't have time to give or money to give, everybody has something to give, whatever that might be. It could be the smallest action of sharing a post, reading a post, learning, educating yourself. That's something that I always say is a great starting point. Watch some films, read some books. I've got some good recommendations that I could share. For Summer on 4OD is a great film to watch if you haven't seen it before. It's about the one woman's experience of living under the siege in Aleppo. The Lightless Sky is a book written by my very good friend Gawali, which tells his experience of coming to the UK as a child refugee from Afghanistan. Listening to the podcast also, of course, I'm biased, but shares many incredible stories which really bring some light and awareness to many different issues and different places, you know, guests from different nationalities. So they're some places to start, but I think that I would always recommend to kind of look within first and think about what it is that you have to offer. You know, you might have a skill that is useful to share. If you're a graphic designer, you could help someone with their CV. If you like baking, you could even just find a local family and bake them something and make them feel welcome. There's refugees everywhere, and for sure where you are, you know, until I had my foster brothers arrive to my family, I didn't realize how many refugee communities there were locally to me. So having a little bit of a look within and also researching a little bit around you, I think that's where I would start.
That's brilliant. And you talked about your podcast. Is there one favorite one that everybody should start with, and where can we find them?
You can find them on all podcasting platforms, so Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. And favorite episode, that is a really difficult one because I have a few, but I would definitely recommend Mez's episode. That's episode 5, but actually episodes 3, 4 and 5 are probably the 3 that I would start with. So episode 3 is with an incredible volunteer called Brendan, who tells the most amazing story of saving a baby from the Mediterranean Sea. And so he worked in search and rescue. He's a firefighter from Nottingham. And then episode 4 is with my mum, and she talks a little bit about her experience of being a mum to 8 kids from 5 different countries. And you got a little snippet of that in the film Mother. You saw a little bit of her, but if you want to know more about that from her perspective, then that's a lovely episode. But some of the more recent ones also very relevant right now. We did an episode about Napier Barracks and about the situation for refugees in the UK right now. And there's a very interesting one coming out next Monday about statelessness and what it means to be stateless, which is something that's new to me. You know, these semantics and these words, they really do mean something and are important to understand the difference between an asylum seeker, a refugee, an immigrant, someone who's stateless, someone who's undocumented, you know, lots of words that I was learning the meanings of from the beginning that I had no idea. And hopefully this episode sheds a little bit of light on that. So yeah, there's some places to start.
So Jaz, tell us what's going on in the UK currently for refugees, particularly in this pandemic with just such a lot of challenge going on for many, many people. How has it affected refugees?
Well, I think, you know, you could answer that there's several layers to that. So of course, the pandemic has affected us all, but I think what's really affecting refugees right now is our hostile environment policy, which has actually been ongoing since before the pandemic and is the brainchild of Priti Patel, who has a very hard line against refugees and has been housing them in, as I say, accommodation that is just not fit for purpose. So 2 examples of that are Penally Barracks and Napier Barracks, which are the first 2 refugee camps in the UK of their kind. And we haven't seen refugee camps in the UK like that before. You know, we used to talk about Calais being on our doorstep, but this is literally on our doorstep here in the UK. And, you know, Napier Barracks is an ex-army barracks in Folkestone that hasn't housed army personnel for years and years and years. It was dilapidated. It was due to be torn down in 2021 until Priti Patel decided to repurpose it to house 400 asylum seekers. But Nicolette, you know, considering that we are in the midst of a pandemic, 400 refugees, vulnerable people sleeping in dormitories next to each other. Of course, there was a COVID outbreak, which affected over a quarter of people, you know, were actually tested positive for COVID recently. And not everybody was tested. So those numbers are lower than what is likely to be the reality. And, you know, this is having a huge impact on people, not just physically when it comes to their physical health, but their mental health. They can hear live artillery. They are victims of war, fleeing war often or not. There's been many suicide attempts in these camps. It's just horrific what is happening here in the UK. And, you know, there are alternatives, feasible alternatives. It's not for lack of options. You know, housing people in suitable accommodation has been done before and is possible and feasible. So that's what needs to happen. And we've had a win in this last week in that Penally Barracks, the second of the 2 camps, has been officially closed down. So now we're just waiting for Napier to hopefully follow suit, because it's absolutely not acceptable to be housing vulnerable people in this way.
So I want to talk about your story a bit further, Jaz. You know, obviously you've got this cause that's so personal to you, and in the last 5 to 6 years, you've absolutely flown doing all the work that you do. Are there times where you see such distress, particularly on our shores, that you lose the faith as such? What keeps you going?
I think when I have such incredible examples of people who are not losing the faith, like Mez, and, you know, I could have shared lots of examples of stories and people today, and on the podcast I do too, and they're the stories that help me keep the faith, because I think, you know, if people who have experienced this firsthand continue to find a reason to get up every morning and find positivity and beauty in every day, then absolutely, you know, you and I can do the same.
And how do you think it's made a difference in your life going on this journey of giving and generosity?
Good question. I mean, I think it's clear to me more than ever that seeking things that only benefit you, success in a metric that is only relating to you and your personal circumstances, that's never going to actually make you feel as fulfilled as it does when you are in service in some way. And that becomes clear to me over and over again, day to day. Like, this is not altruistic, like it makes me feel good as well, for sure.
Absolutely. And what does the future hold? Have you got any ideas?
Well, who knows what the future holds right now, right? Like, it's a very strange time, I guess, to be making any kind of plans. But season 5 of the podcast is due to be an exciting one, because we're taking the podcast on a journey. So instead of highlighting individual stories in each episode, we are going to start from the border of Syria and come back to the UK overland and share stories from each country to highlight the situation in that country for refugees and asylum seekers. So that will be an exciting series, and I'm hoping that this year there'll be some opportunities to be back on the ground and connecting with people, not via Zoom. So that's exciting too. But yeah, I mean, more of the same, more stories, more awareness, more talks. We do lots in schools and universities and things like that, so lots of those coming up, especially as they're opening back up again. So yeah, I mean, follow along for more of the same. We're always very happy to grow our community.
That's brilliant. And Jaz, one final question to all of the people who were just like you, who are listening now, who are just getting stirred perhaps in their own causes to start to do something and help. What would be that one tip, that one piece of advice?
Stay curious, ask questions. Don't believe what you read in the papers as gospel. Dig a little bit deeper, ask questions, because I think that was, what brought me to Calais in the first place. That was what took me to places that I never thought I'd go, to people that I never expected to meet, and even my little brothers. So yeah, keep asking those questions.
Wow, Jaz, it's been such a pleasure to hear from you tonight. You're a brilliant storyteller of truth, and you're so inspirational. And I just want to encourage you in all that you do. I just think it's brilliant and amazing. And I'm sure everybody can't thank you enough for that. Thank you so much, Jaz, for your time tonight. You've been very generous to us, so thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you for hosting this lovely platform. It's so important.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you. Well, look, if anybody wants to find out more about the Worldwide Tribe, it's pretty easy. I'm sure you can do a Google search and obviously find out more about Jaz O'Hara's podcast on Spotify and get listening and get supporting. But if you want to also learn some tools on how to give well and start your generous journey, perhaps there's a cause that you just haven't quite discovered that you really want to get behind, or perhaps you found one and you just haven't got the confidence to go for it, then BeMORE's here to help. So we run free online 7-session Monday evening programs. The next one is launching on the 12th of April. There are 2 spaces left, so come and sign up through bemore.co.uk and come and discover the joys for you in terms of giving and the joy of experiencing the impact that your giving will create to others. And maybe, and I'm sure, if you start with those small steps, you can achieve great things just like Jaz. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jaz. And that's all from us, but we shall see you very soon. Thank you.